today's episode of the Retro Gamers Podcast, John Story returns to the show to co-host, we react to some retro birthdays and retro news, and we discuss our experiences with and the history of educational video games. Hello everybody, and welcome back to the Retro Gamers Podcast, episode 409. Anthony here, and joined this week by my friend John. John, welcome back.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming back. You were here a few episodes ago.
Yeah, it was a good time.
Yeah, we talked about games that had an emotional impact. Remember that one?
Yeah.
You brought a lot of stuff with you that week.
I did. I brought, I think, even more this time.
Yeah, I know. I see how, like, when I always have to create space for you when you come because you need to spread out. You have to spread out all your stuff.
It's like show and tell.
For showing. Yeah, the show does become show and tell with you because you have so much stuff.
I do. And I've recently come into a bunch more stuff. A good friend of mine, retired computer teacher, tech teacher at a high school, has a huge collection of boxed vintage computer games, and he slowly has been digging out, and he every once in a while says, "Hey John, you want to dig through this stuff?" And so, like, I think I picked up like 50 or so boxed computer games the other day from, so that's taking me forever to play through these, but yeah, I have a bit of a collection. Yeah, a bit. That's an understatement. Understatement of the century. But welcome back. Obviously, it's always nice to have you here. And I think we have a really good topic today. Actually, it's a topic that you brought to me. Well, it's a boring topic on its surface, I think, but hopefully by the end, everyone listening will find that we're going to kind of expand on, you know, the idea of edutainment being more than just, you know, educational software and game packages to teach math and reading. It goes, I think, far beyond that if you expand the definition.
So what you're saying is we're going to educate them.
We're going to educate your viewers.
All right. Well, we definitely are, because like I said before we started recording, I printed out your term paper.
Oh, yeah.
That with all of your notes and sources. He actually sourced these things, which I find really, really funny.
Well, you know, if you're going to make claims about some things, I'm going to make some potentially wild claims. It's nice to have a little bit of source validation in there as well.
All right.
See where I'm getting this from?
No, I don't.
No. Well, you will if you read the links.
I will if I read the sources.
That's right.
Yeah, but can I challenge your paper on like plagiarism in any way, shape, or form?
Oh, it's tons of plagiarism.
All right, perfect, good.
Oh yeah,
it's only fun if you plagiarize.
Well, yeah.
But before we get into that, and yes, we are going to be talking about educational games because there have been plenty of them over the course of video game history, and we'll get to those in a little bit. But before we do that, and as you lose all of your papers, I wanted to cover a few bits of retro. So two things I wanted to, two birthdays actually I wanted to point out. One I did not point out a month ago, and one that I just read about happened last week that I missed. But a month ago, I think it was March 24th, I want to say, March 24th, 2005, the PlayStation Portable was released. So we're actually celebrating the 20th retro birthday of the PlayStation Portable.
And you don't have one.
And I don't have one.
I'll have to rectify that. I may even have an extra one. Let me see what I can do.
All right. Yeah, I know you always know how to work your magic. So
I'll work some magic.
But the PSP turned 20 a month ago, at least the U.S. release. It came out in Japan, I think, in December of 2004. But PSP, I've always heard everybody just praise this system. Again, I didn't play handhelds growing up. I still do not play that many handheld games. Except when I take my Switch or my Steam Deck with me when I travel. But I've heard nothing but great things about the PSP.
The PSP was, I remember when it was released. I was in the military at the time, and I remember going to the BX and seeing it there. And the thing that hit me the most, and if you look at the technical specs, it's not really on par with, but people did some clever programming tricks. There were a lot of games that looked pretty on par with the PS2, but in handheld form. So... which is incredible. It really felt like a handheld, PS2 at a time when Nintendo was, basically giving us the equivalent of like a handheld Super Nintendo, which I understand that the Game Boy Advance was technically far more powerful than a Super Nintendo, but let's be honest, most of the games looked Super Nintendo-ish.
Yeah. Well, and see, and that's a huge appeal. I mean, especially because the PlayStation 2 up until recently was the best-selling console of all time. Being able to have a version of that in your pocket was just insane. But yeah, so I just wanted to give the PSP a little bit of respect since I missed its birthday a month ago. And then last week was the 30th retro birthday of the Nintendo Satellaview, which we never got. Yeah. It was only released in Japan, but I just thought it would be an interesting thing to bring up because the Satellaview offered an kind of an online component to video gaming before we had that online component in console. What they did was you would be able to use a satellite broadcast. You sent it to a satellite broadcast that led to games that were accessible through the satellite broadcast. So they actually had like a Zelda game up there. They had an F-Zero game up there, and you were able to play these games off of the broadcast.
And if I remember correctly, it wasn't like something that you could do anytime. It was broadcast at specific times, and you'd have to catch it at a certain time. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, which is crazy when you think about it.
Yeah.
But then, it's funny because this made me think about when I think it was the Commodore and some of the early computers, when you used to be able to play a game off of a cassette tape, and you would, because it would just have you would be able to record the actual code to the game.
It's funny you should mention that because there was there's a British YouTuber, and he was talking about failed CD add-ons or add-ons for consoles, and one he brought up was kind of like crossing the line a little bit. For the Commodore 64, the company Codemasters, which did a bunch of very famous Commodore 64 games, including the people are going to kill me. It's not Chucky Egg. It's the other egg guy that would run around as a platformer.
The other egg guy?
Yeah.
Humpty Dumpty.
No. Anyway,
Eggman from Sonic.
There's people watching right now, particularly anyone from the UK, who saw this and be like, "Oh my God, it's Dizzy, the Dizzy series."
Oh, okay.
So anyway, in 1990 or 91, they released a CD, and they did it for multiple. They had a plan for multiple systems: the Amstrad computer system, the Commodore 64, and I think they were going to try to do one for the Nintendo Entertainment System, but that failed because they sold so poorly. But basically, what they did is they released 20 games on the CD. But they didn't provide a CD add-on for the Commodore 64. What you would do is you'd put it in like a regular CD player, if you had one, which not everyone did in 1990.
Yeah.
And you would connect it to the audio line. They had a special cable to connect it to, I think, a joystick port, actually. And you'd run a program that came on a disc, and it would capture the audio in real time, which was a bunch of noise that was like your tape player that you would connect to your Commodore 64 and have games. So it was like a CD add-on, sort of. But it was still very slow.
It was a way around it.
But it was a lot of games on one disc.
Yeah. So, and that to me was just like that first step to where they got to with the Satellaview, where they just decided, now we're going to use broadcasting. We're going to use satellite broadcasting. So I just thought it was an interesting thing to bring up because, the Satellaview is now 30 years old. 30 years. How far we've come.
Well, speaking of birthdays, and since I'm not here every week, and I may not be here in July of this year will be the 40th anniversary of the Amiga. So it's a big year for Amiga fans. There's a lot of development in Amiga games still. I don't know if you've touched much on Amiga gaming, but
I have not.
You could have a whole show on Amiga games produced over, like, say, the last 5 years. It's pretty incredible. Like, there's a Castlevania that I think is coming out, or loosely based on Castlevania for the Amiga, that looks amazing. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Well, I got to look for that.
Yeah. Anyway.
All right. Cool. All right. Well, that was it for the birthdays. And then there were a couple of other things I wanted to bring up. And I know I shared this article with you and Jack, and I thought this was kind of exciting. But somebody, and when I say somebody, a developer named Ruben Retro, R-U-B-E-N, Retro, he created a version of Microsoft Windows for the Game Boy, and which is kind of crazy when you think about it.
Windows like 3.1.
Yeah, but still a version of Windows.
Yeah.
Which is wild. And in it has a version of Minesweeper, like the way you used to get on Windows. It has a built-in media player. and it has a paint program that's compatible with the Game Boy printer. And so this guy is actually selling this. He did a pre-order, it sold out. He did a second pre-order, and it sold out.
Wow.
So if anybody is interested in having a version of Windows on your original Game Boy, check out Ruben Retro on Etsy, and wait until it's available again. Actually, I think it's his publisher who has it, which is Cajas.
What's
Retro.
this cost?
Cajas. You know what? I did not click on the link to see. Oh, it looks like it's 40 euros.
Okay.
Actually,
I mean, that's certainly a fair price for it's boxed nicely. The product is certainly unique. There's nothing like that. I think it's pretty neat.
Yeah, to be honest with you, if I Game Boy'd more, I would just have it for the novelty of it.
I say it's mostly a novelty.
Yeah.
Like, how many people out there still use a Game Boy printer? I'm just curious.
I have no idea.
I think I've seen one at the Retro Show down in Long Island.
Oh yes, I did see one there.
But
yeah, so you're essentially gonna pay like $45-$50 plus shipping to play Minesweeper.
in what looks like Windows 3.1.
Yes, and who doesn't want to do that? All right, and the last bit of news I wanted to share. It's that time of year again. The 2025 Video Game Hall of Fame is coming back around, and I know they usually announce the winners in May, but I just wanted to go through the finalists really quickly for this year. I thought they had a few good ones, but some of them I was really kind of curious about. So for the Video Game Hall of Fame this year, they always have 12 finalists. You're already...
I don't understand some of these, but go ahead.
Yeah. All right, so we're going to go through them. It's Age of Empires.
Makes sense.
Angry Birds.
I get it.
Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare.
Nothing with a 4 in it should be on there.
I was going to say, yeah, like those always drive me nuts too, because I'm like, you want to do Call of Duty, the first one, fine. But yeah, by the time we're at 4, unless it's like reinventing something or creating a whole new thing, correct. I don't understand. Defender for the Atari.
Solid choice.
Great idea. Frogger, which still isn't in the Hall of Fame.
That's surprising.
I know. GoldenEye 007 from N64.
The impact, yeah,
which
huge.
Should be.
Yeah.
Now this one's interesting. Golden Tee golf game. It was a handheld golf game that had a trackball.
That's garbage.
That you would buy just like in the store by itself. That's the first time I think I've actually seen a game like that.
How does this get?
I don't know.
How does this list come together?
I am not sure.
Okay.
Harvest Moon.
Okay.
Which was a good game. Mattel Football, the original handheld football game.
That belongs on
from the 70s.
Yeah, it was huge. It was from the 70s, but I want to say that they re-released and kept selling that for years. My brother had one in 83, 84.
Well, they actually re-released it even like a couple of years ago. Like the actual original version for people to buy. I saw them in stores.
I bet my brother would get a kick out of that. He actually has his original one and he gave it to me. I gotta
nice.
take a look at it. It needs some work.
But you need to reciprocate now. Get him a new one.
I'd like to fix his original and get a new one. I think that'd be pretty cool.
Well, I think you can still find them in stores somewhere. I don't know exactly where, or maybe online.
NBA 2K?
So NBA 2K, which I thought was interesting, but I remember when the 2K series first started, how amazing. Now, I didn't have NBA 2K, but I had NHL 2K on the Dreamcast, and I was amazed with how much detail they put into the game. And based on the description here, the reason why it is getting nominated is that they put an incredible amount of realism and detail into the NBA 2K series when it first came out. And for that alone, I think they're also trying to like kind of laud the whole series, not just...
Well, that's what they should do. That's why I don't like the
Call of Duty 4.
Call of Duty 4. What is NBA Live in...
I don't know.
In the mix at all? I mean,
I don't know the NBA
before?
Games that were on.
Because NBA Live came out before NBA 2K, and I would say that their impact, and also like FIFA.
FIFA, I think, has been nominated before.
Okay.
So
I would imagine that those should be in there before NBA 2K.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I don't know.
If we're sticking to basketball, NBA Live.
This is all very subjective.
It came out in the early '90s.
Did it?
Mid '90s.
Maybe. Yeah.
It was on the Sega Genesis.
I remember a lot of games on the Sega Genesis that were NBA, but I remember like when they were getting specific, like Bulls and Lakers playoffs, Bulls and Celtics.
Oh yeah,
like those games.
But NBA Live had staying power.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I guess they disagree with you because NBA 2K is currently nominated.
Clearly.
And then the last two finalists.
What do I know?
The last two finalists are Quake.
Deserving
for sure, and Tamagotchi, which was an insanely popular little keychain game that they actually re-released when it came when the 25th anniversary came out. They released a new Tamagotchi.
It came out in '96,
Yeah.
and so like
I had one.
I did not. I think I was probably not their target audience. I was definitely not their target.
Yeah.
I was too old.
Well, I had one. I played it for a couple of days, and then I let it die. Because it was literally like a...
Isn't that like the digital equivalent of one of those babies that they send you home with in high school?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you are responsible for taking care of this thing and making sure it lives.
Doesn't sound fun.
And it's nonstop.
Yeah.
So,
no,
but anyway, those are the 12 finalists. I'm curious to see which ones they pick. Me personally, I think Frogger is long overdue. I think GoldenEye is
Defender.
Yeah, I think Defender. Age of Empires is a good one too. But they usually, I want to say 4 or 5 get in every year. So
out of all of this, only 4 or 5 will get in.
Yes.
If Golden Tee and Call of Duty 4 make it, I'm gonna be
you'll be very unhappy.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? We only have less than a month to find out.
Okay.
Until then, we'll just have to wait. And that's all I had for Retro News. And I think now we can switch over to our actual topic, which, as John led on before, we are talking about educational video games. Maybe more specifically, edutainment, right?
Yeah, because there has to be an entertainment aspect to this.
Right.
It was just a program that just ran you through math exercises. I don't think
it would be
any
boring.
kid would want to do that.
No, there's got to be some type of fun element to it.
I mean, I like to think of edutainment as a Trojan horse for video games, you know, and I think Trojan horse both for the parents who are buying into the concept that their kid is going to, you know, make it into Harvard by playing, you know, the Oregon Trail, and also it's a Trojan horse for the kid.
Yes.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with having a Trojan horse for the kid.
Game, but you know, secretly he's going to learn things,
you're teaching
whether he wants to learn or not.
Yeah.
And a good edutainment title should be teaching without it being obvious that it's educational.
Exactly. And I agree with all of that. And I will say, like, even in my childhood, I fell victim to a few of these. I definitely did. Sure. I learned through gaming, which isn't a bad thing.
We'll have overlaps. I'm confident.
Well, we're definitely going to have overlaps, and I think we're going to have an overlap right off the bat because I see what's on your paper, and I know what's on my paper.
You
and
can't
I know
talk
what's to the left
about
of me, and I know what's on my screen. No, you can't talk about edutainment without the first official edutainment game, which was the Oregon Trail. Oregon Trail. Yeah, I mean, to this day, people still talk about the Oregon Trail. It still gets released in different formats. Originally released in 1971 and developed by 3 people whose names I have sitting here somewhere. Dan Rowrich, I can never say his last name. Bill Heinerman, Paul Dillenberger. They created the game specifically to teach 8th graders about 19th century pioneering. And the whole goal of the game was you're supposed to get from Independence, Missouri to Willamette Valley, Oregon, without losing all of the people in your carriage, in your party. And as you went along, all these crazy things happened. The wheel on your carriage broke. Your oxens died. You got sick. You have to ford across a river. And then you had to make sure you had enough supplies with you to get through the seasons.
Yep.
There was definitely a lot of challenges there. But again, these 3 guys decided they wanted to create a teaching tool on the computer that would be a little bit more entertaining than just having to explain these things.
And they did this at a time. You have to keep in mind, like, we're going to talk about games that kind of go way back, and I knew that this game went way back because I remember playing Oregon Trail on my Apple II in my classroom, because every classroom in my school had an Apple II.
Nice.
And if you were lucky, you got a half hour or an hour, once a week or once a month or whatever it was to play some edutainment. And Oregon Trail was high up on the list for everybody. And that would have been 1985, maybe 86. I was doing that. I would have been in second grade when I started at that school. And the thing is, I thought, okay, so this is a mid-'80s game. No. This game came out in 1971 on like a mainframe.
Yes.
For an entire like city district. I didn't know what MEC stood for. Did you know what MEC stood for?
No, I did not.
So MEC, and of course this is the one thing, it is in my notes, is the Minnesota Educational Computing Consortium, a state-funded organization that developed educational software for the classroom. So this was a massive organization that goes back to the early 70s. And Don Ross, I'm going to mess his name up too. Rowich.
That's what I'm using.
Did a lot of the programming out of the three. And he did all of this on a time-shared BASIC running on an HP 2100 mini computer. Now, mini computer sounds small. We're talking about something that would have probably filled up half of this room here. Huge. And the reason they call them mini computers, you know why they call them mini computers?
Well, because they were smaller than the actual ones that took up full rooms.
So they are smaller than mainframes, which took up full rooms. And so what we're using right now to record this is a micro computer.
A micro, yeah.
Right. So this thing was done on a computer that they would have to, they call it time shared. You'd put your program in and it would hit the computer through the network, and then you'd have to wait for it to actually be compiled and everything. So it was a process. And then when you would actually run the software, there was no screen. The game did not give any feedback on screens. It would give you feedback to the moves that you made within the game on printouts.
Wow. That's wild.
That was how the game played.
Jeez.
But the kids loved it. Yeah.
And the kids loved it, and the rest is history. This thing has come out on so many different consoles. Not consoles, so many different computers, so many different versions over the course of now we're 44 years in on this thing. It hit almost every major computer, like Apple, Commodore, you name it, it was on there. And then eventually it wound up coming to consoles. But this was the thing I found intriguing, was that the first console to actually do a version of the Oregon Trail was the Nintendo Wii. So like over 30 years later, it finally hit a console.
I know it's been on a lot of different computers.
Yes.
Right. So it's got there's 25 versions of this game.
Yes, I actually had that in my notes too.
Yeah. So this thing was released on cell phones, consoles, standalone handhelds, which you have an example.
I was just going to say, here's the handheld right here. It went from the mini computer that filled a room
to this,
where I can just sit here. And not only that, I don't have it out for show and tell, but last year I bought the Christmas ornament of the Oregon Trail, which plays just it has the screen with the opening song, the music. And then it's a lenticular that switches to "You died of dysentery."
You died of dysentery. You will see on T-shirts, and if you've never played the Oregon Trail and you've seen that shirt, "You've died of dysentery," and you're like, "What the heck is that?"
And actually,
guy saying?
you can see it right here on my, right there on the bottom of the box.
You died of dysentery.
I'm very happy I grabbed this while it was available, because I love the fact I've never opened it to play it, but I can just hit enter, and if it still has battery, which it does. Everybody knows that.
Yeah. So, I mean, here's the core concepts of this game.
Now this is going to keep going.
So the core concepts of this game, if you've never played the Oregon Trail, one, you have your initial supply. You have to purchase, like you're starting out in this long journey, so you have to make judicious decisions to like how many extra parts for your wagon, how much food, and how much ammunition.
How many clothes.
Food, shoot animals for your food, clothes. Like I said, there's occasional hunting for food. You'll be able to buy supplies occasionally and trade at forts. There's a lot of inventory management for supplies, variable travel speeds depending upon conditions, frequent misfortunes, and of course, as you just mentioned, game over upon death or successfully reaching Oregon.
Yeah, and the goal to get to Oregon is just one of your party needs to get there. You can sacrifice everybody else.
You probably will sacrifice a lot of people.
You wind up sacrificing. I don't know if anybody, and I'm sure there are people out there, but I know for a fact, like me, all the times I play the game, I have never made it to Oregon without losing at least one person.
Yeah.
Usually multiple.
I usually lose lots of people.
Yeah, I usually lose. Usually I wind up getting there solo. Like one person gets through and it's me.
Yeah. And then they're still producing. I mean,
I was
that
just about to
handheld,
say-
you can buy that handheld
Yep.
today in Target.
Well, you can buy that handheld today. I recently, last year, picked up the PS5 version, which, by the way, is the deluxe edition.
Okay.
Because it comes with the, let me get this, the Cowboys and Critters DLC.
Okay.
So, you know, just adding to the value of the game. They've added more elements to it. I got a little postcard in there for Oregon to get, you know, telling me that it's a great place.
Aren't there like board games and card games based on this as well?
And right next to me
Oh, there you
is,
go.
because I'm a board
There you
game
go.
nut too, here is the card game. Actually, there's there's an actual bigger version of this, like a board game. What I love about this, my friends and I would play it all the time, is in the game they have the cards, and there are cards on, you know, in here where you will randomly open a card, and the card will just say you've died of dysentery and you're out of the game. Or the other one, you get a snake bite. Don't forget the snake bite kills you too. But what I love about this is it has a little dry erase board. So you can play this game with 6 players. You put the names of all 6 of you on the card. And then as you die, you fill out the gravestones on the back for your players and how they died.
I think we should play this soon.
We should definitely play this. It's a lot of fun.
My kids would probably get a kick out of this.
Yeah. And to be honest with, and also I want to get they did like an extent, I don't want to say extended version. They did another version of the game where there's an actual playing board too, so you can put the cards on the playing board.
Nice.
And I got to get the bigger version of it too.
Love it.
But it plays exactly like the computer game. All of the elements of the computer game are sitting right here,
That's awesome.
just with 6 players. up
You
to
know,
6 players.
I think Apple Films is working on a movie for this.
Yep, I wrote that down too. They actually bought the rights in 2024, so there is a film adaptation. There's already a script, and they have a couple of guys working on it.
It would be hilarious if they try to throw some edutainment kind of angled humor at this.
That would be funny.
Yeah.
Actually, I thought you were gonna say something more along the lines of I want to see like a Groundhog Day version of it, where it's like, we got to a point. Oh, we died of dysentery. Oh, wait, how did we get back to independence?
I would be nervous of if other studios were involved. Apple has a pretty good track record.
Yes, they do.
I think that they'll probably do well with it. One thing I want to point out is that this game spawned a lot of other games that weren't necessarily edutainment, but certainly were inspired by it. One of the most popular games in the 80s, and then they had re-releases on MS-DOS later on, was
The Seven Cities of Gold.
Seven Cities of Gold.
Never heard of that one.
Electronic Arts. So this is a game where you are sent by, I think, the Spanish monarchy. So this was EA's era where they did everything like these foldable, like the discs were held inside, and like a record album kind of a setup. But you're sent out by the Spanish monarchy to get gold, which is kind of historic. And there's a lot of this takes place between 1492 and 1540. The back says the age of discovery, exploration, and conquest. The stage of history belongs to Spain. Now it belongs to you. So you start out with a certain number of ships. You have to go and discover different tribes, and there's numerous different cultures that are highlighted. You'll run into Aztecs, and I think I can't remember all of the ones. Maybe even Pueblo, even though that makes no sense. Anywho, you have to do a lot of resource management, like an Oregon Trail. You have to get to these tribes, but try to find the way to the chief before the tribe members kill you. You can kill them and just go scorched earth and take what you want.
So you can Columbus it.
You can Columbus it, or you can give gifts and stuff to overcome language barriers. So you don't necessarily have to be historically accurate. You can take a more peaceful approach and do this in a more peaceful manner, or you can go full, Columbus scorched earth, and it's, I think, very, very interesting. You'll have to, like, when you start out in Spain, you have to go into different shops, and you have to get your ships equipped, and then when you go places, you can split off your resources. You can leave 2 ships in port and a new place to manage that, and then There's also, this is the 80s when this came out. This game came out in 84. So like there's some old school thought. There's kind of some manifest destiny attached to this game. At least this version. This did get re-released, I believe, on the PC later on, because I remember having a much fancier version, very similar to Pirates. Pirates is another game that's kind of similar, but instead of being a discoverer to essentially get resources for Spain, now you're doing similar things, but you are a pirate, and you've got your ship to manage and your crew and whatnot. And this also was re-released as Pirates Gold on the PC later on with much better graphics.
As I say that, yeah, that one's a very popular one.
But again, these are all kind of following the same. I won't belabor these, but the same general,
the same path, the Oregon Trail,
resource management, some historical information that you're going to learn about, the age of sail. In this case, in the early age of discovery of the Europeans discovering the New World. I mean, there are already people there that had discovered the quote-unquote New World. But very, very well done. I want to say, I'm going to butcher his name. The guy who came up with this, I think, was Will Wright.
That seems like a fairly simple name.
No, but he was boy, I should have done more research on this one. Anyway, look into this.
It's not in your 20 pages of notes?
It's not.
Aw.
No, this was like a last-minute edition. I grabbed this on my way out. I was like, oh,
well, that's okay.
This
so
is very...
people can look it up, right? Seven Cities of Gold and Pirates.
Yeah, and you can actually do some
pirating.
Pirating. Oh boy,
that's really tiny.
Blurry. It's tiny. Yeah. Anyway, you can sword fight.
Oh well, that's very important.
Yeah. Yeah, and this came out on like everything.
Yeah, well, because again, the whole point is you had to add some entertaining elements to it if you want
people to learn about.
People to learn about the history. So sword fighting is definitely a way to go with that.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. All right. So we go from the Oregon Trail, right? We go from the humble beginnings and their spin-offs. I don't know what you have next on your list, but
you want me to do mine next?
I would say because one of the ones that I have, I'm actually staring at a box because you have one of the original ones.
Okay.
But I don't know if that's what you have next on the list because I went a little chronologically. I don't know what you did.
A little bit. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll run through mine pretty quickly here.
Okay.
I don't have the physical copy of this. And it was a very simple game, but again, this goes back to my elementary school classroom on the Apple II, and had a game called The Lemonade Stand. And essentially, the Lemonade Stand was a business simulator, but also it taught basic math, and there was resource management. And it's very simple. At the very beginning, you get several rounds of playing a lemonade stand. And it was created in 1973 originally, also on some kind of it was MEC, again, the Minnesota Educational Computing Consortium. And so again, this came out on a mainframe originally, but eventually this was published and promoted heavily on the Apple II.
Okay.
So this was one of the games that most schools, edutainment titles that most schools would have gotten along with their Apple IIs, because Apple II was a computer that really, if it wasn't for their deep discounts provided to the school systems and their push as an educational platform, I don't think Apple would have survived the 80s. Frankly, the schools, I think, were absolutely pivotal to their marketing. So it was a game that started out on a mini computer with minimal or actually no graphics, much like the Oregon Trail. And so you'd be able to do things like manage your stock, like how many cups of this lemonade are you going to make today for your stand, because that's going to have some costs associated. What are you going to charge? Because depending on how much you charge may depend on how much you sell. You have an understanding. They'll give you a price for what it costs per cup. And then you'll have to worry about like how much advertising, which also costs money to buy the signage to put up. And then you have to worry about weather, which is an uncontrollable environmental variable. And it was a very simple game, and there was rudimentary graphics, but like the whole point was to maximize profits. Like this is a great little Jimmy like corporate simulator, right? So this is to get a kid excited about math and business.
Yes.
So
well,
that's all I'll say about that.
I was gonna say it's a smart way to do it, but it also brings up a whole other it also creates almost like this whole other genre, because I can like just think of how something like this has been translated to other games, like when you think of SimCity. And you're you're up, and there it is, sitting right there. You're managing an entire city, and you're building it, but you're also dealing with the weather. You're dealing with
Godzilla.
You're dealing with Godzilla, who shows up and destroys things. But you deal with like how to balance how to balance the budget with everything so that you're in the green and you still have money to continue building your city. Simple beginnings like the lemonade stand have gone to stuff like that. And then even other games that you wouldn't necessarily think have similar elements when you go into sports games today, where they have GM mode, where you're the general manager of a sports team, and you have X amount of money, and you got to sign your stars and do contracts and all this stuff. Like all of those things, all kind of like.
The Brits love those games for soccer in particular, managing, and they were huge on the Amiga. Yeah. I never got into them because I was never that big of a soccer fan, even though I played it. Certainly didn't want to play a game about managing the team, but for whatever reason, those are absolutely edutainment titles.
They are.
People over there love them.
Yeah, and they've expanded that to every sports
sport,
game and manageable, including wrestling games. Wrestling games have a GM mode now too, where you're in charge of a specific show on TV. So with WWE, it's like you're in charge of Monday Night Raw, and on Raw you're choosing, all right, who's my roster and who can I afford and everything. Oh, this person got injured and now I got to do that. All of that type of stuff. It's just and that's a whole, again, that has become its whole genre, a whole separate genre, but still has, to your point, it has an educational element to it. Business management.
Yeah,
and it all starts with a little.
It starts with a lemonade stand.
Everything starts with a lemonade stand.
It's hard to deny that lemonade stand games, that title, that its impact. They have to give them some credit for that, because I don't think you can think of anything that came before 1973 that taught those same principles.
I don't think so.
So pretty incredible. And where I was coming up with Will Wright, I don't know if he did Seven Cities of Gold, but the name had to be wrong. It was another.
Wright was wrong?
Wright was wrong, but he did produce SimCity.
Nah.
So, and before, if you're curious to look into this idea of SimCity, some of the basic principles of city building came out of a game on a Commodore 64 called Raid on Bungling Bay. So
never heard of that one.
That was his first game.
Okay.
And it was successful enough, and the principles were successful enough that he was able to build on that, and that's where SimCity came from, and that was, as you know, hugely successful.
Oh, yeah. I mean, huge, all the way to, they made so many different versions of SimCity, and then obviously you got other spin-offs and different versions of it. In fact, I think there was a game on the PS5 that I downloaded, and I didn't get into it because I knew if I started, I would get sucked in and wouldn't stop playing. The way I used to do it, like Roller Coaster Tycoon and The Sims. It was called Cities Skyline.
Yeah.
Cities Skylines. And you literally build an entire city, like skyscrapers and all that stuff. And I was like, oh gosh, I don't have the time. As much as I would love to sit here and do it.
I never got past the original SimCity because it was such a rudimentary program. Our little IBM PS2 Model 25s, which were essentially 8088s, 8086 CPU. Very, very, very slow. Computers with monochrome screens and low density floppy drives, we could run SimCity off of one disk, and on black and white screens or monochrome screens, it actually looked great. And that was one of the few games, along with some of the early Sierra titles, that I could do. And you really had some very rudimentary, basic things you had to take into account from a city planning standpoint. And then there was a resource management aspect to it as well, that I would say definitely falls under edutainment. But then all the other Sim spin-offs, like there was Sim Earth, Sim Life, Sim Ant. They even, I want to say, I don't have to put this in my notes, they actually did some corporate productions. Are you aware of these?
No, I'm not aware of those.
So for two corporations, they had one called Sim Refinery for the Chevron Corporation.
Oh, jeez.
Managing refineries.
Wow.
That would be interesting. And
there's an audience for everything.
And Sim Health for the Markle Foundation.
Oh.
So those are
no idea.
Those are some oddballs.
I was gonna say the well, and don't forget the Sims.
Of course, the Sims.
I
never played the Sims.
I got sucked into the Sims for a year. I played it like crazy, and then I realized, I'm playing a game where this person's life is better than my actual life, and that's when I stopped playing.
Well, there's the flip
side. I got
side
meta
to
with
that.
it.
There are people that torture their little Sims too.
I did not do that
because I've read about this or
Yes.
I've seen this. and it reminds me of that. There's that old Twilight Zone episode. I don't remember what it's called, where there's this one boy in town who has reality warping powers.
I love that. I love that episode. It's so good.
It's like,
and
that's
you know
what you are.
Yeah,
you're
and
that kid.
And you know what that kid's name is?
No,
Anthony.
Are you serious?
In the episode. Yes, that's why it's one of my favorite
episode?
episodes. I forget the name of the episode. I literally just watched it like a week ago. It was on Pluto TV, but I love that episode.
In horror, kids are always the most terrifying.
They really are.
They're worse than clowns.
And they remade that episode for the movie, the Twilight Zone movie that came out in the early '80s.
Never saw the movie.
They took 3 episodes from the show and they remade them. So it was that one, Nightmare at 20,000 Feet.
Okay.
And then the third one, which I can't think of, but it was the one that had a horrifying story behind it because I think one of the actors died.
Okay.
Or no, wait, I'm mixing things up.
I hope you're watching Black Mirror because that fits in with the podcast as well.
I know. I'm not watching the new season yet.
Because there's a essential successor to Bandersnatch, which is game related.
I did watch Bandersnatch.
So it's basically you find out what happened to the video game director.
Oh, cool. I have to check that out.
And there's lots of call outs, like there's a lot of games highlighted in that as well, like Magic Carpet gets like they show Magic Carpet and Doom and a couple other ones. Yeah. So anyway, we're off topic.
All right, yeah, we strayed. That happens sometimes. All right, so bringing us back. So we covered a few there. One of the ones I wanted to bring up, and I know you have it sitting over there because I thought of it while I was going through these other games, but this was the one that I remember from school, and it was Reader Rabbit. Oh. So when we had computer time, we actually had a computer room. We didn't have a computer in every room, as you can see. There's one of the versions of Reader Rabbit. We didn't have a computer. We didn't have a computer in each classroom. There was just a computer room, and once a week we would have time spent in there. And I remember Reader Rabbit specifically being on those computers. Again, it was created in 1984 by the Learning Company. It focused on teaching reading, spelling, and math. And he did it through point-and-click adventure style, if you remember that. I haven't played one of them, obviously, since I left grammar school. But what surprised me while I was looking at this is that they made over 30 games, 30 different versions of Reader Rabbit.
Yeah.
But ranging from 1984 to 2019.
Mm-hmm.
So it hasn't been that long since we've gotten a Reader Rabbit game. And then outside of computers... Again, Nintendo had Reader Rabbit games on the DS and the Wii.
Okay.
So and this was one again I just wanted to bring up because it was so prevalent in my youth and at my school. I have no experience with it after leaving school, but to see the staying power of it is just really.
The great thing with these edutainment titles in general is that it was a way for hardware to get in the hands of kids because it convinced the parents, like I said at the onset of this discussion, that they needed that that computer or that DS or that iPad. We're not going to get into, I don't think, iPad or mobile, but that you could have a whole separate.
Oh, that's insane.
There's an insane amount of edutainment on iPads and tablets and phones now. So we're kind of going, further back than that, although the iPad's come out so long ago now that that's coming up on retro.
Yeah, we're getting there.
We're getting there.
We're definitely getting there.
But there was so much money to be made. Like even Atari during their 16-bit computer era, they had like Reader Rabbit. They had a spelling bee. This taught spelling. You had your magical math, which taught math concepts, and then of course you have your general store, and they had the character of Bentley Bear. And do you know where Bentley Bear comes from?
I definitely know where Bentley Bear comes from.
Where does Bentley Bear come from?
He is from Crystal Castles.
One of my favorite Atari games.
I love that game.
Yeah.
That was the first game I think that was the first game I ever played that was that had that isometric view.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was amazing, and I loved the sound effects and the music. Yep. It was very iconic. But Bentley Bear, I think Atari really missed the mark on it. That could have been their Sonic. That could have been their mascot.
I agree with that.
And they, through their edutainment line, I don't know how many. I happen to have 3 of them. I don't know how many they made, but they're pretty solid. I remember I loaded up a couple on my Atari ST for one of my kids, my youngest, to play, and it kept her entertained for, I don't know, a good hour or two, one of them. So,
Hey.
which for a little kid is pretty incredible.
That's actually really, really good, especially today.
Especially today.
Especially today.
Yeah.
And that was the first time I ever found out that Bentley Bear existed outside of Crystal Castles, was actually when you showed me that today. So,
Well, are you getting a 7800 plus?
I am not.
So you bring out the worst in me sometimes because
I know, I keep sending you things.
Anthony will send me things and be like, hey, this is on deep discount. This is a great deal. And I'm like, I'm not getting that. I don't have the money for this right now. So right now through Woot, which used to be a separate company, but I guess now it's owned by Amazon.
Yeah, I noticed that. I didn't know when that happened.
Yeah, me neither. But they are selling the Atari 7800 Plus, which allows you to play 2600 and Atari 7800 game cartridges, but it has modern convenience of HDMI out.
Yep.
And it comes with a wireless controller. But I don't know if you realize this. It also comes with a platformer game, a Bentley Bear platforming game. So, and I've seen some reviews on it, and by all accounts, it's actually pretty good. It's their attempt at a Mario-esque platformer.
Oh man, you're gonna make me order this thing now. I sent it to you to be bad influence. I don't want you to throw it back at me.
So like now, Atari Corp seems to be jumping on. Now, granted, Bentley Bear, that platforming game, I think was not done by Atari proper, but I think they've licensed it.
Yeah.
And I think they maybe will recognize that Bentley Bear might be their platform character to go with.
All right. Well, considering everything Atari is doing right now, I mean, it would be nice for them to anchor themselves to a platform character.
It would be nice.
Yeah.
I would love to see them build on this using that kind of level of hardware.
And then make a deal so he can be in the next Super Smash Brothers.
Oh, well, yeah, there you go. That's pretty niche.
Yeah, definitely.
I would like that.
All right. We're gonna move on to I did read a rabbit. What did you what do you have next?
You got to talk about typing tutors.
Yeah, I have that on my list too.
Oh, you do?
I do.
Okay, well, let's just jump right to that. Which typing tutor comes to mind for you?
All right. So actually, oddly enough, one of the ones that comes to me is a more recent one, but I wanted to go back and talk about the obvious ones, which are Mario. Mario teaches typing 1 and 2.
Okay.
I know you have something that's a lot earlier than that, and I saw this one.
This is like the Oregon Trail. It's been released and re-released
a million times.
Yep.
And I chose not to deep dive on that one, but the cover of it was always weird to me.
Yeah, I don't even know.
It's not really related to the game.
Don't know if I don't even know if she was even a real person.
Well, she was. She posed.
Was she?
She posed for the photo.
Well, no, they have a woman posing for the photo, but I don't know if she was even a real person. Yeah, and it's funny. It says here is another true artificial intelligence software system. They were even using AI terms back then.
Yes, they were.
From the publisher of the acclaimed Chessmaster 2000. Yeah, it was Entertainment Program of the Year winner of the U.S. Chess Federation Computer Chess Championship. That's an odd thing to be awarded. Yeah, so it's got some games attached to your typing, and if you type too slow, I guess your car crashes or whatever. That concept, however, has been carried over to some more exciting games like Typing of the Dead.
That's the other one on my list.
Oh, I'll stop. Go ahead, you go.
So yeah, well, I wanted to touch on Mario because there are a bunch of Mario educational games, but Mario teaches typing 1 and 2. They were released in 1992 on Mac, Windows, DOS, eventually Windows, and the second one came out in 1997. I always love talking about Mario games when they wind up on something other than Nintendo,
like a CDI or something.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we all know those are ridiculously bad, but the Mario Teaching Typing series was just interesting because they did release it straight out on computers. They were never released on any of their consoles, so these were computer only. These were, which is interesting because normally they always find a way to bring it back to their.
And the Famicom
consoles.
had a keyboard.
And the Famicom had a keyboard.
Yeah.
And in 1992, the Famicom was still going strong. The Famicom was running in Japan until 2001. It didn't get discontinued until 2001, which is crazy.
Yeah, that is kind of crazy.
And it had everything. I mean, the Famicom had an online component to it. where people would go online and bet on horse racing and things like that. Like there was all kinds of crazy stuff to Famicom.
Very Japanese.
Yeah, very Japanese. But that's why it lasted so long. So I was actually very surprised that these two typing games didn't wind up on the Famicom.
Okay.
But swinging over to Typing of the Dead, so Typing of the Dead was released, oddly enough, was actually released in arcades in Japan. We never got. I don't think we ever got the.
I never saw that.
Yeah, I don't think we ever got the arcade version. It was only released in Japan, and they took House of the Dead 2, which was a shooting game, which was a light simulator game, and they literally just reskinned it into a typing element where the zombies are coming at you, and the way that you fought off the zombies is the zombies had a word coming with them, and you had to type that word in quickly, so you shot them. And you killed them, and obviously as more zombies came, you had to type faster and faster and faster. I don't think to this day, I remember playing this game. I don't remember where I played it because I never had
the Dreamcast. Right?
It was on It was on Dreamcast, and then eventually I think it wound up on the PlayStation 2 a little bit late, like in 2004.
Was there a keyboard for the PlayStation 2?
I don't know how they did it on there.
Well, there was a Linux, so probably.
There might have been.
Maybe just plugged in a regular USB keyboard.
Maybe, yeah. It might have been a USB thing.
Yeah.
But what was amazing with this game is just how popular it actually was. I never owned the Dreamcast version, so I'm not 100% sure where I played it.
I want this because I'm terrible at typing.
Well, I was always good at typing, but I still couldn't beat this game.
Really?
I was never good enough because too many zombies.
Okay.
Too many words.
Okay.
Or if you're typing and you're trying to be quick and you make a typo, it's like that just dooms you right there because it was crazy. And then again, there was a sequel done based on House of Dead 3 in 2008 that was only released in Japan. So they did Typing of the Dead 2 based off of House of the Dead 3.
Okay.
Again, really fun game.
Typing can be fun.
Typing can be fun when zombies are coming at you. Yeah. So just another way to do it. And then I had one other game on my typing list that I actually did not know about. I found that while I was doing my research. And the reason why I want to bring it up, and I don't know if you have this one on your list, it's called Dungeon Scroll, and it's a dungeon crawling RPG that focused not necessarily on typing, but it was more about word. You did type on your keyboard with it, but it was about word building. So you're going through a dungeon crawler, you come across a monster, and then it gives you a bunch of letters on the side. You have to use the letters that you're given to just create words. And depending on the type of word you created...
I would love that.
Yeah. Depending on the type of word you created would do damage. Some of the letters are worth double or triple. Some of the letters are given, like... The letter will show up with a magic spell. So if you use that letter, it casts a magic spell. Some of them cast healing potions.
What's this called again?
Dungeon Scrawl.
Dungeon...
I'm sorry, not Scrawl. Dungeon Scroll.
Dungeon
I had the word
Scroll.
crawl in my
What
head.
system is that on?
It was released in 2003 on Windows.
Oh.
And then it was also released later on Android and iOS. And the whole idea is just spell words to defeat the enemies as you're going through the dungeon and collect your loot and all that stuff.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
It actually is a lot of fun. From the video I saw online, the minute I watched the video, I said, I need this game.
Because, the original, adventure games... were text parser, right?
Of course.
But they wouldn't give you letters to put a word together. You just have to imagine and hope you could come up with
the right
words,
and...
and sometimes that wasn't standardized at all. And to give you an example of a game, this is prior to graphics, really.
The
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. There was a company called Infocom that published.
I can't believe you have that complete because I love it.
Yeah,
I love it so much.
This game was one of many by Infocom, and you really had to use your imagination because you were just presented with a text parser, and they'd give you a brief description of what's in front of you, what's happening, and you have to you're in a room and it's dark, and you're like, okay, that's all you're given. What do I do? Okay, feel around for a light. It doesn't understand it, so you're like, oh, geez. Feel around for a light and that'd be right. And it's you have to come up with a phrase that
like search for light switch.
The writers of the game intended, and so it could be very frustrating, but also it forces a lot of creativity because there were no graphics. And then this got morphed into like the Sierra games, like King's Quest and Space Quest and Quest for Glory, and it was similar to the game you're talking about, but the difference from what you're saying to King's Quest, I mean, there were a couple exceptions. There usually wasn't a timer attached to it. It wasn't urgent, you know. So what you're saying is you're in a battle and like this thing is attacking you and you've got to come up with words based on the letters in front of you. That sounds very, very fun.
That sounds fun for me too, and that's why as soon as I saw it, I said, I knew after we record this episode, I'm gonna go shopping.
Yeah,
I'm gonna see if I can find this thing somewhere.
Yeah, sounds great.
Yeah, it definitely does. And you know what? I don't know. Like the first place I'm gonna look is Steam, because if it's available on Steam, I'm just gonna grab it.
Steam.
Everything's on Steam. But that's what I have for the typing games. Did you have any other typing tutors?
No.
All right, cool.
I was never big in typing tutors, and you can tell just based on what I said earlier that I'm a terrible typer.
You're a terrible typer.
Yeah.
See, and in high school, I remember we had a typing. I don't want to call it a game because it was literally just it put a paragraph in front of you, and you had to write the paragraph as quickly as you could, and then it would tell you your words per minute.
That's what I was more familiar with. That is terrible.
It's awful.
Yeah.
It's just read this and type it fast.
Yeah.
But that's also how I learned how to type quickly.
Okay.
So I can't say I type correctly in terms of finger placement. I was like, but I do type quickly.
Yeah.
So, all right. So that was it for the typing games. Where else do you want to go? Where in the world do you want to go?
I really want to talk about this one. Should we jump right to that?
Well, it's on my list.
I think we should jump right to that. So you can't talk about edutainment without talking about Carmen Sandiego.
No, you cannot.
And in this case, we're talking about where in the world is Carmen Sandiego?
The very original.
You could fill in the blank with a whole bunch of, like, where were the different Carmen Sandiego games? Do you have that listed? I don't know.
I have Where in Time. Okay. I remember Where in Time is Carmen Sandiego. I have, let's see, hold on. I have a whole list here.
There's some bizarre ones. There's like Where in North Dakota or something, I think.
Well, actually, the North Dakota one.
Yeah.
I don't remember the whole story, but the city of North Dakota commissioned somebody to create a specific North Dakota version of the game.
Okay, I've got it here. Where in America's past, space, North Dakota, Japan, time, USA, and Europe, and I'm sure there are others.
There are definitely others, and the brilliance of this game. I love the way they built the setting of it, where here is this villain, Carmen Sandiego, who steals famous artifacts or famous items.
So you learn about the famous artifact, you learn about the famous item.
Yep, and then the way that you track her down, her or her henchman, is you go to a city. The city gives you some information, and then you start questioning people in the city, and they will give you more information of like, oh, okay, well, I saw this person here, and they went somewhere else, and they give you a piece of information, and you had to kind of research in the game a little bit to deduce where to go next.
Yeah.
So it was all about learning about the city you were in, learning about the artifact itself, and then figuring out where you had to go next. It was a very, very brilliant way to educate you on these things.
This was an early example of a software company coming up with a multidisciplinary approach to edutainment. So you were learning your geography, your art history, but you also learned mathematics, language arts, and other subjects. It was really diverse. So it kept your interest because, if you have a game that is, Bentley Bear teaches math, if you're a kid who hates math, you may never pick that up. This has a little bit of something for everybody.
Yeah. To this day, like, I still love going back and playing Carmen Sandiego games.
Yeah.
It was developed by Broderbund. It originally came out in April 23rd, 1985. It actually came with the World Almanac and Book of Facts. So that was another element to it where it's like, not only did you get a game that was teaching you, but it gave you a book to actually look up information and learn about things. And that carried on. I don't remember if every game came with it, but I remember when I first bought Where in Time is Carmen Sandiego for the Sega Genesis, it came with a dictionary.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is interesting. This
is weird. Why
am I getting a dictionary with my video game? I was like, but that was the whole point. It was an educational video game, and it was so well done. They've had over 25 games in the franchise.
Yeah.
They've developed board game versions of it. In fact, there's a new Carmen Sandiego game that came out not too long ago.
Okay.
Actually, there was an animated series.
My kids loved it.
By Edutainment, a company I am very, very fond of because it was one
quiz show. There was a quiz show.
There was a game show that I remember watching on PBS.
Yeah.
It aired from 1991 to 1995.
Okay.
Incredibly, like the first thing I think of when I think of that is the group Rockapella, who sang the song on the show, and they were also part of the game show. They were there live, so they would actually do questions and do different things on the show. So they were actually part of it, which was great. It won 7 Daytime Emmys and a Peabody Award. The game show.
That's pretty incredible.
Which is great. And I remember watching the show. I wanted to be on that show so bad. But I was always afraid of the bonus round at the end, because the winning team, what would happen is they would pick a continent for that episode, and the continent would be on a giant floor in front of you.
Okay.
And then the host of the show, I forget her name, but the host of the show would then rattle off 7 countries, and you had to pick up this marker and you had to mark the country on the map, but you had to know where everything was on the map in order to win, and it was so challenging. I watched so many people. I didn't know world maps that well, like continents that well. Where it's like, oh, there's Africa. It's like, I don't know where the Congo is. I don't know.
You might not get very far in that game.
Yeah, but that was the bonus round though. It's like that's where you won the grand prize.
Okay.
So, but just a great show. It was really, really well done, and again, all built off of this game that came out in 1985.
They even did comic books.
They made comic books. They made toys.
Yeah.
Obviously, well, any cartoon.
I think what's
merchandise.
People also, I know. I remember as a kid seeing Broderbund, and I'm like, okay, so that's the educational software developer.
Yeah.
Like in 1985, this company was, and through the 80s, amazing as a general game company. Do you know some of the other games they produced? Choplifter, Load Runner.
I was gonna say, if you name them, I know them.
Karateka, Prince of Persia.
Oh, Prince of Persia.
All of the games I just listed, Apple II was their original platform.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Well, not Choplifter, but yeah.
Yeah, I wonder if we're ever going to get a Carmen Sandiego movie. It would be ripe for a film.
I would be shocked if they don't.
Yeah, because it'd be very...
they did Dora the Explorer, for crying out loud.
I know. I mean, it would be very like... it would be like a James Bond-ish kind of thing. With spies and all that stuff. I mean, that could be... I'm sure. Again, I didn't look it up, but I'm sure somebody's got to be thinking about that.
Yeah, I would be shocked if they don't eventually do that.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
Anything else on Carmen before we move on?
No.
All right. Do you want to go someplace else?
I want to talk about something a little non-standard.
All right. I have a couple of other ones on my list, but go for it. What's non-standard?
When people talk about edutainment, I think I've never heard. It's possible people have brought this up, but flight simulators.
I thought about putting that on the list too, because it's incredibly educational, but it's so specific.
It is. It's specifically to learn about flying, and the software ranges from, trying to replicate as close as possible. Like Microsoft Flight Simulator today, you can kit out your computer. Like I have a friend who's got a full cockpit and it moves and stuff, and he's a licensed pilot, and it is as real can get. But the beginnings of Microsoft Flight Simulator was actually Flight is called Flight Simulator by a company called Sublogic, and Microsoft ended up buying this company, and then through multiple iterations getting to where we are today. There were other very famous through the 80s and 90s flight sims that were fairly realistic. One that comes to mind is the Falcon series.
Okay.
So I remember Falcon, the 4.0 version in particular, it was a gray box, and it was very thick, and then the manuals were just immense, and you would learn from an unclassified standpoint, because the F-16 was still very much still is an active aircraft in the U.S. Air Force. You would learn everything about flying an F-16 and running missions, and you could, even in the 90s, buy all sorts of flight yokes and stuff to kit out your computer. And people were so into learning it wasn't so much about the graphics on screen. It was about learning how to fly that aircraft in a realistic way using a computer. And I'll tell you what, when you get a game like Chuck Yeager here, Advanced Flight Trainer, this is on a Commodore 64, you really had to want to learn about flying because the graphics, especially back then, were nothing to write home about. Frames per second were ridiculous. The FPS was so low on these machines, but people ate it up because they were learning from home, because getting lessons to fly are very expensive, and good luck getting into an F-16. That's probably not going to happen for the average person. You know, and so to me, I think that flight simulators, that's kind of where a lot of that sim and equipment started out with, and now we've branched off into like big rig simulators. I don't know if you're familiar with those. They're very realistic, and they bring in resource management as well, kind of like the Oregon Trail, about managing your trucking company, starting your trucking company. They have train and farming simulators that have all spun out, and they're games, but they put so much realism into them now that I would still say that these fall into edutainment.
Yeah, no, I mean, I wouldn't argue it. I wouldn't argue that at all. I would say with I remember how popular Flight Simulator was in the 90s. Specifically, there was a friend of mine in high school who absolutely fell in love with these games, and he used to bring in printouts of like the courses he charted on Flight Simulator and things like that. And then like I would be like, so what did you do? And he'd be like, oh, he's like, last night I flew a plane from New York to LA. And I was like, okay. I go, how long did that take? He's like, oh, it took 6 hours. I go, what do you mean it took 6 hours? He's like,
6 hours.
Because it takes 6 hours to get from New York to LA. You literally fly the plane the entire time in real time. And it was always amazing to me because I was always like, wow. I was like, but what are you doing for those 6 hours? Because a lot of that time you're just kind of up in the air, you know. It's just, but I couldn't parse that. I really couldn't like sit there and be like.
But let me ask you a question: do you want to fly a plane in real life?
No.
Exactly.
And that's what it is. It's like you really need to have that passion for like this is something I want to learn to really get into it. So that was something I never got into, but I definitely understood the interest in it. And actually, funny story. The guy, my friend from high school, who played this game, I ran into him like 2 years ago, maybe a year or two ago.
Okay.
He's a TSA agent at the airport. Literally, I handed him my ID. And he's like, "Holy crap!" And
so he never made it through flight school.
He never. I guess not. But it was funny because I showed him my ID, and then he pulled. We had masks. He pulled his mask down, and I was like, "Oh wow!" I was like, "This is random." It was very random, and I'm like, and immediately when I saw him sitting there, I go, "Well, I guess Flight Simulator. You really loved planes."
Really,
I was like, "So he's
really
plane adjacent now."
Yeah, there's stuff like that I don't get. Like flight sims never really did it for me either. The ones that I did enjoy a little bit, I think it was like F-15 Strike Eagle.
Oh, I remember that.
Maybe the third one, and and that's steers more towards arcadey.
Yeah, it is more arcade. Yeah,
right. Not a little less realism, and that's there's dog fighting and stuff, and that's kind of the whole point.
Yep.
Same thing for like the space sims. I tend to skew to the because those are loosely based on like theoretical flight simulator, but in space. But I get more interest in the arcadey ones, like the Wing Commanders, and that sort of thing. So I just because I don't get it, I'm like yuck someone else's yum. I appreciate the educational aspect of it. Like that trucking simulator, the most popular one right now is called American Truck Simulator, and this thing is sold far better than I would ever imagine. You're running a big rig. 2 million copies plus sold.
Yeah. No, you know what? That makes sense because the trucking industry is huge here in the U.S.
Massive.
Yeah, it's massive. So that actually doesn't surprise me at all.
And there are kids. I can't wrap my head around. I have no desire to drive a giant truck like that. But again, different strokes for different folks. Some people love it.
I was going to say, everybody's got a different,
Like those farming simulators look boring as all get out, but there's people that just love them.
The closest I came to that is Farmville. When Farmville was on Facebook.
You'd say Harvest Moon.
No, I think it was it Farmville on Facebook?
Yeah.
Or there was a farming simulator on Facebook that I played all the time, but it was a very simple, cartoonish.
Very simple. Yeah. Like the farming simulators are very realistic.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. I'm not
combines and driving these giant tractors around.
No, thank you. If that's the case, I'll just buy it for him.
Yeah.
All right. So one of the other ones I had on my list, and I have to touch on it again. Nintendo is very well known for kind of covering their bases with everything. I talked about how like they had horse racing games and all kinds of things, but in terms of edutainment, they definitely had their share of Mario games. Now I know I talked about Mario. I talked quickly about Mario Teaches Typing, but there were a few other games that came out that were Mario based that I thought needed to be mentioned. The first one, which was the earliest one, I had no idea existed. And this is a really interesting one. I'm curious to see what you think about it if you don't know what this is. It was released on the Famicom in 1986, and it was called I Am Teacher Super Mario Sweater.
No.
Okay. Now listen to this game.
Clearly not localized.
Not
Just
localized,
Famicom.
just released in Japan.
Okay.
It was designed by Royal Industries Company Limited, which was a Japanese appliance and sewing machine company. And what
Sounds logical.
Right, and what you did in the game is players would choose a knitting pattern, and then they would choose a design to knit and the kind of yarn they wanted to use.
Okay.
And the designs were like Mario, Peach, Luigi, like those, character-wise and whatnot. So you would knit the design in the game. When you completed the design,
Please tell me you could upload it and have it.
you had the option to order it from the company for a fee, and they would put that design.
They need to bring this back.
Yes.
This is incredible.
Designing your own. 1986, they did this.
Are there any of these sweaters like on eBay that you can find?
I don't know, but I need to look for it now that I know about this game.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible.
Isn't that crazy?
I love that idea.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah.
And then that's it I had for that one. The next one that came up on my list was definitely much later. And I remember I used to rent this game from the video store when I was younger.
Okay.
I never owned it because I could never get that far. It never held my interest long enough, and it didn't get good reviews for that reason. But it was released on the Super Nintendo. It was called Mario is Missing. Do you remember Mario is Missing?
I remember seeing a box, but I never played it.
So Mario is Missing is actually the first game starring Luigi. That was on a console. The very first Luigi game was Luigi's Hammer Toss on Game & Watch in 1990. Mm-hmm. But this was the actual first console game that starred Luigi, and the whole concept is Mario is missing, like the title. Sure. Bowser has taken Mario, and you got to try and find it.
So there's clues.
So, and the way that you do it, and this sounds very Carmen Sandiego, Bowser has also stolen artifacts from places. And what you do is you travel to different cities, and you have to try and get your clues to figure out where Mario is. But as you're doing that, you have to figure out what city you're in, and what artifact Bowser stole.
Okay.
So again, very Carmen Sandiego, but you're now on a console and you're walking around the city. And the other thing you have to do is once you figure out the answers, it'll tell you, like, now you move on to the next city. You had to get Yoshi to eat the thing that's blocking you, the Pokey that's blocking you from moving on to the next city. And you do that over and over again until you get to the end and save Mario.
How many of these did Nintendo sell?
It didn't sell. It sold enough to earn a profit.
How many got returned?
I think they made like, I want to say, if I remember what I read earlier, they wound up making like $7 million off of this game.
Oh, adjusted for inflation, that's not bad.
No, it's not bad,
Not
but
bad
the game did not get reviewed very well. They did another version of it a few years later.
Okay. Called
Mario's Time Machine. Same style of game, except now you're traveling through time and returning artifacts Bowser stole through time. And this game was actually released on DOS originally. Oh, and actually I forgot to say that about Mario's Missing. These were both DOS-based games.
Okay.
Mario's Missing was then ported to Nintendo, Super Nintendo, and then Mac and Windows as well. Mario's Time Machine was DOS and then Super Nintendo in 1996. They did not continue porting that one because
that's pretty late.
It was at the end. It was kind of at the end of the life cycle of the Super Nintendo.
Okay.
The game did not get good reviews. Because again, it was very Mario's Missing, which was not very popular.
But why was, I mean, you gotta, like, I'm all about mascots like Bentley Bear, for instance, being used in edutainment, but I think Mario is so heavily thought of as a platforming character. Like, I would imagine that would immediately disappoint some kids.
Well, I think what it was because Mario is essentially, like, if you think about him, he's Nintendo's mascot, right?
Yeah.
So how do you spread him out to a wider audience? You know, so they started doing edutainment games with him. So maybe they're appealing to a younger audience in a different way.
A for effort.
Yeah. And they went even younger with 3 games on the Super Nintendo in 1994 called Mario's Early Years that utilized the Super Nintendo mouse, which didn't get utilized very much, except you know, Mario Paint was obviously the big one because that's where you got the mouse. And these were specifically targeted towards preschool kids. It was fun with letters, fun with numbers, and preschool fun. So again, using Mario to appeal to a younger audience in a different way than the usual platformer games we were used to. But that was my list of Mario related games outside of typing.
I didn't realize there were that many.
Yeah.
Wow.
There were quite a few.
Huh. I never tried any of that. I remember seeing Mario typing, you know, in DOS, but that's the only one I can remember.
Yeah, no, there were a whole bunch. And then there was
Mario's Missing, I remember seeing the box for that.
Yeah, Mario's Missing, I remember. Yeah, I definitely remember renting that a few times. And then, like I said, I would just get bored and turn it off.
Turn it off.
Yeah, so not one I would necessarily go back to unless I want to do like a retro playthrough and suffer through it.
Okay.
But Mario games.
Well, I won't belabor this next entry here. But I think we've talked before, my main interests growing up on the computer in particular were adventure games, point-and-click adventure games, right? Like the LucasArts games, the Sierra games in particular. And there were a number of edutainment titles. Back by the time I was getting into those games, I would think I was past the age of the target audience, but I've since discovered some of these. Sierra's Dr. Brain games were pretty big.
Dr. Brain.
So this one's the Island of Dr. Brain. So imagine a similar engine as like the King's Quest series, but they kind of strip down the story and throw in way more puzzles. And the puzzles really run the gamut from, you know, science, language, math, even computer programming. There's a section where you got to program a robot using basic logic. So it's, again, multidisciplinary, using kind of a point-and-click interface. And they did a number of games in the Dr. Brain series. There's a Castle of Dr. Brain. That's one that comes to mind immediately. This is the Island of Dr. Brain. I know there are a couple others, but I can't remember which. And Roberta Williams, again of Sierra fame, also
very nice.
Mixed up Mother Goose tales, and it's...
Oh.
Does this ring a bell to you?
Yes.
What do you remember of this?
That I might have played that in... Did I play that in school? It depends what year that came out.
So this...
That looks very familiar.
Came out in 1987.
That might have... Yeah. I might have played that in school.
So the title kind of gives it away. Some... Think of nursery rhyme type stuff. Some of the characters from nursery rhymes, things have been mixed up, and so you get to carry one item at a time, and you got to find a character to match it with, and then there's a poem, a nursery rhyme plays out. It's graphical in its interface. You move around, a world kind of like you would in a classic point-and-click adventure game. This here is for the Atari ST, but it also came out on DOS.
Let me see that one because this one actually, this looks really familiar to me. I might have played this.
Yep. I would have loved that as a kid. It's definitely geared towards elementary school age kids. Roberta Williams was the producer of this game, the director of this game, and she was famous for the King's Quest series, but also like Phantasmagoria. Maybe is that infamous or famous?
Might be both. I have it sitting up here somewhere, or the sequel I have.
But she was the heart and soul of Sierra. Basically,
yeah, she was.
Her husband Ken Williams kind of ran the company. He was the business mind of it, and she was the creative. So
very, very cool.
So it's kind of, you got to mention. I want to mention Nose, and then my last one I'll mention here real quick. And there were lots of ones like this. Electronic Arts again. With
of course.
This was a program that would allow you, in this case, using an Atari 8-bit computer, but they had this for the Commodore 64 as well, and I'm sure there were 16-bit and 32-bit versions. it would allow you to essentially put notes on a staff and
Create music.
and it would play out the music. You can adjust things like tempo and key and whatnot.
Nice.
And it was considering the era, a pretty powerful program. So this was the music construction set for Electronic Arts.
Oddly enough, I didn't mention this before, but since you brought up music construction, Mario Paint.
Oh yeah,
had a music construction element to it. You know, I didn't think of putting it in that category, but I mean, Mario Paint was all about drawing,
but
music construction, but the music construction where you actually got to build music, but it was based off of character sounds. So it was like Mario jumping, and it was getting a mushroom. It was all.
I feel like they didn't name that properly.
No, Mario Paint was not the right name for that game.
Yeah. It
definitely was not. But I remember I had Mario Paint. I loved Mario Paint. I created a music video using Mario Paint to Bohemian Rhapsody.
You have to tag that on the end of this.
I would love to do that, but I can't find it. I recorded it. I know that was the problem. I recorded it. I recorded it to a VHS.
Okay. Is it in your VHS stack somewhere, maybe?
For the life of me, I thought I saved that specific VHS, but when I went back to look at it, I couldn't find the video on there.
You recorded over like a Buffy the Vampire.
South Park.
South Park.
I might have recorded over it with South Park.
Okay.
Yeah, but that was pretty much it that I had on my list. Are you good?
There's something I want to talk about briefly.
Okay.
Okay. So
I had one other thing, but I think we've gone for a while.
Okay. So I'll talk briefly about this. That I think you could almost stretch the beneficial, the cognitive. So let's stretch what educational is, right? Beneficial to a person's cognition, and I would stretch it a little bit further, potentially to mental health.
Okay.
Right? So there was a study out of Aalto University. It's a university that's pretty well respected in Finland. So if you haven't heard of it, that might be why. And they had a study that revealed how one notoriously challenging video game is helping players find resilience and meaning and hopefulness in real life. What is one of the most challenging games over the last 10 years that has gained a lot of notoriety? You just die constantly. What comes to mind?
Speak and spell.
Dark Souls.
Dark Souls. Okay.
Dark Souls. So they did some in-depth analysis of players' discussions on Reddit. Researchers from the university focused on personal narratives related to mental health and gameplay in Dark Souls, and they highlighted the multifaceted ways players experience related to challenge and often bleak fantasy action games. And one of the things that players had mentioned, a couple different players mentioned how that the game structure had taught them to accept failure, where they in real life were struggling with that as part of just life's process, in this case the game's process. And that Dark Souls, through its ruthless difficulty and powerful narrative themes, seem to empower many players to confront real-life struggles with perseverance and hope. And also the online community that has sprung up around this very difficult game, and I'll be honest with you, I've never played it, but I have friends who are addicted to this. It has been also very reinforcing the community, like a lot of encouragement, like hey, don't give up. And develops real life, and this is kind of a key point, real life friendships through this plane of this game and getting in this community. And there's games, I think, for a lot of very introverted people that deal with agoraphobia, anxiety. Games provide potentially, especially modern games that have online components, or they have communities that you would interact with to further your progress in your game, can have serious benefits socially for people that would otherwise struggle in social situations. And I have the link to this. I'll provide if you want to put that in the notes. I think it's a pretty interesting article on this study.
This is not the first time I've heard about this study.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I remember coming across an article about it because, and it was an article that was covering different studies that have been done, like how Tetris helped military people with PTSD and things like that, and Dark Souls was on the list for that.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I remember reading about that, but this was a while ago, if I remember correctly. Dark Souls is one of the games that I own it.
Same.
I own it. A friend of mine recommended it to me, and I tried it. Like I played just the first part, like how to get through the first boss. And then after that, I meant to go back to it, but I just never did.
Yeah.
So it's one of those games that's always been on my list that I want to try. But the fact that it could give me hope makes me want to try it more.
Yeah.
For those days when you're just not feeling hopeful.
And I found another interesting report. This was now done by the U.S. National Institute of Health. So they did a long-term study globally on depression and anxiety, and they found that using certain video games could be potentially useful as part of the therapy. And they separated, they gave some game examples. So for different issues. So for cognition, they highlighted strategy games, exercise-based games that require physicality. So think of your Wii bowling.
Wii bowling or Beat Saber.
Beat Saber. But then there were some ones that I wasn't familiar with, like Boson X. Never heard of that one.
Don't know that one.
And Rayman.
Oh, Rayman, I know.
Yeah, for cognition. Goal achievement, you've got Portal 2, Team Fortress 2, RPGs in general. RPGs came up time and time again for therapeutical use.
That makes sense.
And here's one that was interesting. Positive reappraisal and mood repair.
Oh.
Some of these,
I need that list.
Yeah. Some of these are very interesting. Related to goal achievement, all the games that they highlighted here showed benefits with mood repair, both in time and magnitude. Portal 2, Mario Kart. This one, I don't know. Slender Man, really?
Really?
Yeah, that seems kind of strange, but that's what they highlighted.
You know what? I've played Slender Man.
Yeah.
I think maybe the goal is it scares your mood into being repaired.
Maybe.
Oddly enough, odd that Mario Kart's on the list there, because I think Mario Kart very often frequents the list of one of the most, if not the most stressful games to play. It elevates your heart rate more than most other games.
But I think when it talks about mood repair, I think that one of the things that you're doing is it's in a sense of escape, and you're engaging. And I think it may also be thinking of there's a social aspect if you're doing a multiplayer. Okay. But yes, fair. Yeah. But I'll send you the link. It goes into emotional regulation, depressive moods, general anxiety. For general anxiety, they mentioned the game Max and the Magic Marker, Rayman again, the exercise games, RPGs in general. Okay. So
that's really interesting. I like that.
Yeah, RPGs. There's a lot of research
RPGs
on the benefits, the psychological benefits.
I was going to say RPGs in general, I think, are beneficial because again, you're role playing, so you're actually creating an extension of yourself in the game, and I think that's what it is. You're able to connect. Yeah. So I think that's really cool.
And it's also a way to try out different. I'm trying to think of the word here, but to try out saying and doing different things. And then seeing what the outcome is in a virtual environment with no penalty that you would have in otherwise real life. So, of course, a lot would depend on the quality of the RPG and the writing and the simulation, but you can imagine how developing RPGs that that this article only covered consumer entertainment video games, not, and I don't know if there are, games designed specifically for therapeutic purposes, but you can imagine that someone could develop an RPG that the scripting was a little more catered towards exactly that, helping someone with anxiety or fear of talking to people in general, of going through a virtual environment scenario where the penalty is negligible, it's virtual. So I think that aspect, I think, would be super beneficial psychologically. And I realize that isn't traditional edutainment, but I think that when we think about edutainment, what is it you're trying to do? You're trying to make a child, you're trying to make a person incorporate information that will help them in the real world. Right? Well, I mean, to me it's a natural extension, is what it is. So just looking at it a different way. Not a replacement, and these articles are very clear, not a replacement for therapy,
not a replacement,
but an aid.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. And actually this year I've covered that a couple of times on the show with Dr. Anthony Bean and Dr. Gameology Daniel Kaufman. So and Edutainment kind of just falls right back into that. So this whole show has become a psychological study, more or less. Yeah. But we definitely covered a lot on educational games, and then you as always, John, bringing the actual show and tell portion of it. You definitely have that covered way more than I do, and I always appreciate that.
Yeah, happy to.
But I think this has been a great discussion. I really enjoyed it.
Awesome.
And for everybody out there, would love to hear your thoughts or your experiences with educational games. And you guys can reach out on Facebook.com/RetroGamersPodcast, on Instagram at RetroGamersPodcast, on Blue Sky, also a Retro Gamers Podcast. And you can listen to us wherever you listen to podcasts. You can watch us on YouTube and Spotify at Retro Gamers Podcast. And you can email at theretrogamers.com. John, where can they find you?
You're going to ask me, so I had to pull my phone up here.
Yeah, I saw you do that. So
on Facebook, I run I started recently, a couple months ago, a small Facebook user group, and it's NY Retro Tech Haven. And it's
a great group.
There's some really great people on there, and people with broad interests. Obviously my main thing is vintage computers, but there's people that are really into consoles, kind of a little more modern, some a little older.
People like me.
People like you, people that are really into media, like records and laserdiscs and VHS and, beta and CED players, like classic early media. It really runs a great gamut, but it all tends to be retro tech focused from gaming to visual audio stuff. So it's kind of broad. The community is largely in New York, but not everybody is. So anyone who's interested, who wants to check it out, again, that's NY Retro Tech Haven.
Yeah, and definitely worth it. There are a lot of good discussions going on there. A lot of walks down memory lane with like certain games and stuff that pop up. So it's definitely fun to check out. And with that, John, thank you so much for joining me for another episode. This has been a lot of fun. It's always a lot of fun with you.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah. All right. And for everybody else out there, we will catch you next time on the Retro Gamers Podcast.